My name is Emily Parker, and this is the story of the night that changed everything. It's not easy to put into words, and even as I sit here, my fingers tremble over the keys. Sometimes the truth sits like a weight in your chest until it demands release. This diary entry, though it feels more like a confession, is my way of finally letting go of the secret I've carried. It all began on a warm summer night in July. My husband, Mark Parker, had been working long hours at his marketing firm. He was a good man, dependable and focused, but lately our marriage felt like an empty room echoing with silence. We barely spoke at dinner, our conversations reduced to work updates and obligatory questions. I was 34, a woman who had once been full of energy and laughter, but I had started to feel invisible, like wallpaper blending into the background of Mark's busy life. That night, the clock had just brushed past midnight. I had been curled up on the couch, scrolling through old photo albums on my phone, wondering where the spark between Mark and me had gone. The house was quiet, too quiet. A storm had rolled through earlier in the evening, leaving the air humid and sticky. I opened the back door just to let a little breeze in, telling myself I would close it in a few minutes. But exhaustion tugged at me, and eventually, I drifted off into a restless sleep on the couch. When I woke, I wasn't alone. At first, I thought it was a dream, the sound of footsteps in the kitchen, the faint creak of the floorboard near the hallway. My heart jolted, and I sat up quickly, blinking against the dim light of the lamp I'd left on. That's when I saw him. It was Daniel Miller. Daniel was Mark's colleague at the firm, a man I had met countless times at office parties, barbecues, and neighborhood gatherings. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair that always looked like he had just run a hand through it. His blue eyes carried something dangerous in them, though I never admitted it out loud. He wasn't married, and though he was always friendly, there was an intensity in the way he looked at me that made me nervous. "Emily," he whispered, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the living room. I knocked, but I don't think you heard. The door was wide open. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my racing pulse. "Daniel, what are you doing here? It's past midnight." He stepped inside fully now, holding a folder under his arm. "I was working late with Mark. He forgot some reports at the office, and since I live close by, I offered to drop them off. I thought he'd still be awake." I swallowed hard, the reality of my mistake crashing down on me. I had left the door wide open, practically inviting the night and Daniel into my home. I should have felt embarrassed, maybe even defensive, but instead there was this strange pull in my chest. The house was dark and quiet, Mark asleep upstairs, and here was Daniel, standing so close that I could smell the faint trace of his cologne. "You shouldn't sneak up on people like that," I said, forcing a nervous laugh. "I didn't mean to," he replied, his gaze lingering on me longer than it should have. "But, you looked so peaceful. I didn't want to wake you right away." There was something in his voice, a softness that felt both comforting and unsettling. I knew I should send him away, tell him to leave the folder on the table and go, but instead, I found myself asking, "Do you want some water before you head out?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." I walked into the kitchen, trying to ignore the way my legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. I poured a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. When I turned around, he was leaning against the counter, watching me. Not in a casual way, more like he was memorizing every detail. "Emily," he said quietly, "do you ever feel unseen?" The question struck me like a chord. My breath caught, and for a moment, I couldn't move. It was as though he had peeled back the layers of polite conversation and looked straight into the hollow parts of me I had tried to ignore. What do you mean?" I stammered. He shook his head, his eyes never leaving mine. "Forget it. It's late. I should go." But he didn't move. And neither did I. The silence stretched between us, thick and charged, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. In that moment, I realized the danger of what I was feeling, not fear, but temptation. It wasn't about Daniel himself. It was about the way he made me feel seen, alive, like the woman I used to be before routine and distance swallowed me whole. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "this isn't right." "I know," he replied, his voice just as low. But sometimes the right thing feels like the loneliest thing in the world. Before I could respond, a creak echoed from upstairs. "Mark." I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Daniel straightened, cleared his throat, and set the folder on the counter. "Tell Mark I dropped these off," he said quickly, his voice returning to something casual, professional. Then, without another glance, he walked to the door and slipped out into the night. I stood there, rooted to the kitchen floor, clutching the glass of water as though it might anchor me. The door clicked shut behind him, but the echo of his words and the way his eyes had lingered on me remained. Upstairs, I heard Mark shifting in bed, oblivious to what had just unfolded downstairs. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt something far more dangerous: longing. That was the beginning of everything. The night I forgot to close the door at midnight didn't just let Daniel into my home, it opened the door to secrets, desires, and choices I never imagined I would face. And as much as I wanted to believe I could forget the way he looked at me, deep down I knew this was only the start.